The date was October 12, 1972, when an airplane very similar to this one, a Fairchild FH-227D turboprop, took off from Carrasco International Airport in Montevideo, Uruguay. It all began down here in South America in Uruguay when the airplane took off from right here at the Carrasco International Airport. When it took off, it was carrying 19 members of the Uruguayan amateur rugby team, members of the team's support crew, family members of the rugby team, and 5 crew members of the plane. There was a total of 45 people on board. Now the plan was to fly the rugby team over the Andes so they could play an English rugby team in Santiago, Chile, off to the west, right over here. So they were to fly from here, land here so they could play the other team. Now because it's in the southern hemisphere, it was early springtime and they were still experiencing winter weather. As a result, the flight was forced to land in Mendoza, right here, Mendoza, Argentina, and there they had to spend the night. Now from Mendoza to Santiago, it's only 194 kilometers or 120 miles west, right over the top of the Andes here. Here's Mendoza, there's Santiago. But the height of the Andes, right here, was too close to the airplane's maximum altitude abilities, so they didn't want to fly over the top of the Andes at this location right in here. So the next day, October 13th, the plane took off from Mendoza at 2:18 p.m. with tolerable weather and headed south down this way. And their plan was to fly south to this place right here. And the reason they did that is because they were going to head west from here over the Andes, over a place called the Planchon Pass, which is about 2,500 meters or 8,000 feet at its highest point. So the airplane would be able to easily clear the mountain range. And their plan was to come up here to Curico, turn north, and then land up here in Santiago. But something went terribly wrong. When they did get to this area, they made their turn to the west, and they're not sure what happened. They think it was a pilot error, that the pilot did not compensate for a headwind, so he miscalculated the ground speed. And the plan was to come over the mountains, over the valley, make a right, head up to Santiago. But the airplane actually was over the middle of the Andes when it made the right turn and started heading north. Now they couldn't see the Andes Mountains because they were above the clouds and everything else was hiding behind the clouds or underneath the clouds. After they made their turn to the north, right about the middle of the Andes here, it didn't take them long to start to descend. And as they descended, they dropped into the clouds, didn't know they were above the Andes until they dropped out from underneath the clouds. And according to one of the passengers, he said the pilots must have seen the mountain ranges all around them because immediately they gave the plane full power, pulled the nose of the plane up to where this passenger who survived the crash said that it was as if they were going straight up, and then the airplane started to shake, which would indicate stalling. And what happened was the airplane actually crashed into this ridge right in here. It ripped the right wing off and tossed it over in this area. At the same time, it ripped the tail section off, and the tail section went tumbling down the mountain, landed down in this area, and the fuselage actually came to rest right here in this area. Now, this happened in 1972, and you can't see the fuselage here because over the years, snow avalanches have torn it to pieces, shredded it, and most likely pushed it down in pieces down into this area here. As of today, there's a memorial here that you can see right here. You can actually hike to it. And they put up a little memorial with pieces of the airplane and other things to memorialize those who did not survive the plane crash. Now, the fuselage came to rest here at an elevation of 3,500 meters or 11,700 feet. And of the 45 people on board, 3 passengers and 2 crew members were killed in the tail section after it broke away from here and tumbled down into this area. So 5 of them were killed immediately. Once the airplane was broken open, 2 other passengers fell out of the plane after the tail broke away, which means by the end of the crash, a total of 12 passengers were killed and 33 survived. But several of the 33 were critically injured, and during the first night, 5 more people would die. So a total of 17 people died within the first 24 hours, and it wasn't until the 8th day that one more died, and it was one of the survivors. His name was Nando Parado. He actually was in a coma for 3 days from a head injury. His 17-year-old sister died on the 8th day, and his mother was actually killed in the plane crash. Now, they were waiting to be rescued, but rescue never came, and after 10 days, they called off the rescue because they couldn't find them anywhere. And after 10 days, these people were absolutely starving. They didn't have any food. They knew they were all going to die up on this mountain unless they got some food fairly quick. So what they ended up doing was, well, they actually started eating the dead bodies from the plane crash. They said they didn't want to do it, and they agonized over eating the dead bodies, but they said they also had no choice if they wanted to live. It was the only food source in this area. So instead of eating their family members and their friends, what they decided to do was to eat the pilot and the co-pilot first because they didn't know who they were. Nando Parado, the guy whose sister died on the 8th day, he protected the bodies of his sister and his mother and would not let them be eaten. And in fact, they were never eaten. Now, when they started eating the bodies, they were hoping that they'd be rescued by then. But originally, they were planning on only eating. They were only going to eat the muscle, skin, and fat. But as the food supply of human bodies dwindled, they ended up eating all the organs and even the brains. Now, what they did to survive the night is they stayed inside the fuselage, and that was their cover, or they're keeping the roof over their head. But 13 days into their ordeal, it was October 29th, while they were sleeping in the fuselage, a snow avalanche came down the mountain and completely buried the fuselage, and 8 more people were killed as a result of this, which left, out of the 45, there was only 19 of them left. On November 15th, one more died from infected wounds, and 3 days later, another died from infected wounds. So they still hadn't been found by December 11th, which was 60 days into the ordeal, and that's when another one of them died from starvation because this guy refused to eat human flesh, so he literally allowed himself to starve to death because he couldn't eat another human being. And when he died, they said he weighed 25 kilograms or 55 pounds. At this point, there were only 16 left out of the original 45. On December 12th, Nando Parado, one of the rugby players, this guy right here in the middle, and another rugby player named Roberto Canessa, this guy right here, they both decided to hike out in search of help. They ended up walking from the plane crash here up over this massive mountain pass right here, and when they got to the top, all they saw were miles and miles of mountain peaks in all directions. Nando Parado decided that they would head over in this direction because he could see a mountain peak over there that didn't have snow on it, so he knew that the altitude was lower. What they ended up doing was hiking down this canyon right through here and eventually making it down to the valley here along this river. After covering 59 kilometers or 37 miles in 10 days, they saw a man named Sergio Catalan on a horse across the river. Canessa, he ended up writing a note on a piece of paper, tied it to a rock, and threw it across the river. It explained who they were and what had happened to him. The man read the note, nodded to him, understood, let them know that he understood what it said, and then he threw them a loaf of bread, and they ended up having to spend one more night. But as the man went down to get help, he saw another man on a horse and told him to go up and meet those guys. So he met the guys, picked them up on the horse, and brought them down all the way to this area. The exact location where they were picked up the next day by military and police was right here. And on December 21st, they were rescued. They were picked up right here in this location. And on the next day, December 22nd, helicopters flew up to the crash site right here and ended up picking up 7 survivors. The first day, left 4 rescue personnel with the other 7. And on December 23rd, the other 7 were rescued after spending 72 days in the mountains. Here is the actual photo taken from the helicopter as it arrived. out of the 16 survivors, of course, 2 of them went for rescue. There was only 14 up here. And you can see the fuselage, or what is left of it, what they were living in for 72 days. And this is them with their hands in the air, knowing that they were finally going to be rescued. And here's the photo of Nando Parado here with the glasses, and Roberto Canessa here. And this is Sergio Catalan, the man on the horse that they saw across the river, who ended up going for help and getting them rescued. So there you have it. The Andes airplane crash that resulted in cannibalism so that the individuals involved could survive the 72 days. You have the basic route and the exact location of where the airplane crashed right here in South America on Google Earth.